Ian Oakes, you're late, the teacher whispered through clenched teeth, thrusting a plastic folder into his hands as he stumbled into the elementary school classroom, still smelling faintly of motor oil and coffee. I know, sorry, Ian muttered, running a hand through his dark hair, still a little damp from the rain outside. His shirt was wrinkled, jeans stained at the knee, and his boots were 2 seconds from falling apart. He hadn't planned on being here today, but when his daughter's mom called in sick again, he didn't have a choice. Across the room, 23rd graders sat in a semicircle, parents behind them in tiny plastic chairs. It was career day, and Ian, a part-time auto mechanic and full-time single dad, was now standing next to a lawyer in a tailored suit and a woman from a tech firm who had just passed around VR goggles. Hi kids, Ian said, clearing his throat. I'm Ian. I fix cars. Some of the kids giggled. One boy whispered, "That's kinda cool." That gave Ian the nerve to keep going. I work at a small garage in town. Fix engines, change brakes, sometimes help people out when their cars won't start at the grocery store. He paused. It's not fancy, but it's honest work. And I get to go home smelling like gasoline, which my daughter says is disgusting. That got a few laughs. In the back of the room, a woman in a beige cashmere coat leaned forward. Her eyes hadn't left Ian since he walked in. She had deep auburn hair swept into a twist at the nape of her neck, clean, effortless makeup, and heels that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But it was her expression curious, soft, intrigued that made Ian glance her way twice. Thank you, Mr. Oakes, the teacher said, moving on. Ian gave a sheepish smile and backed toward the row of parents, trying not to knock over any first graders. Dad, a little voice squeaked. Ian's heart lifted instantly. His daughter, Violet, ran up and hugged his leg. You did good. Told everyone you could fix anything. He crouched to kiss her forehead. Thanks, Bug. You're the reason I'm here. As the event ended, parents started filing out. Ian tried to slip away quietly, but the woman in the cashmere coat walked straight up to him. You're Violet's dad, she asked, her voice smooth but confident. Ian hesitated. Yeah, that obvious. I'm Ava Monroe. That's my son, Victor. She nodded toward a boy with sandy hair and sharp eyes who was currently challenging Violet to a paper airplane contest. You're the one who talked about the corporate finance firm? Ian asked. Her presentation had involved something about dividends and mergers, but he'd been busy trying to hide a grease stain on his elbow. That's right, Ava smiled politely. You were hard to miss. Ian raised a brow, because it looked like crashed the wrong event. No, she said with a slight laugh, because you were real. He stared at her for a beat too long. Ava's perfume drifted toward him, something subtle and expensive. She didn't seem like someone who usually talked to guys like him. I don't usually do these things, he admitted. Violet's mom couldn't make it. Ava nodded, not pressing. Victor's dad hasn't been in the picture since he was 2, so I get it. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, not pity, but understanding. Well, Ian motioned awkwardly toward the door. Wait, Ava said suddenly. Would you want to grab coffee sometime? Just single parent to single parent. Ian blinked. You want coffee with me? Unless that's weird, she said, her confidence faltering for the first time. No, it's not weird. I just didn't think. You'd get asked out by the millionaire in the front row, she teased lightly. His mouth opened. You're a millionaire. She shrugged. Technically, yes. Ian chuckled under his breath. I drive a truck with a broken radio. Good, Ava said. Then you'll actually listen when I talk. He laughed. It felt like the first real laugh he'd had in weeks. They exchanged numbers old school, scribbled on a napkin from the front desk, and parted ways with kids in tow. That night, Ian tucked Violet into bed. Is Miss Ava your friend now? She asked, peeking over her blanket. Ian hesitated. I don't know, maybe. She's pretty, I like her. Ian turned off the light and kissed her cheek. Yeah, I think I do too. He lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. He was a guy who rebuilt carburetors in his garage and bought second-hand sneakers. She was the kind of woman who probably drank wine with names he couldn't pronounce. But still, when she'd looked at him, it hadn't felt like charity. It felt like interest. Real interest. 3 days later, they met again. Ava chose a simple cafe, despite Ian insisting she could pick somewhere fancier. I like this place, she said, sitting across from him in jeans and a green sweater. Besides, I'm not trying to impress you. You're doing a terrible job then, Ian said dryly, and to his surprise, she laughed. They talked for 2 hours, about their kids, about work, about the time Ian accidentally installed a muffler backward and nearly blew someone's eardrums out. Ava told him about her son's obsession with dinosaurs and her firm's recent merger that nearly gave her a panic attack. By the time they stood to leave, Ava touched his arm and said softly, I haven't laughed like that in a while. Same, he said. She paused. Would you want to come to dinner next week? My place, nothing crazy, homemade pasta. Victor's been begging to make it. Ian hesitated but nodded. Yes, I'd like that. Ava smiled, and for the first time in years, Ian felt something warm and unfamiliar settle in his chest. I hope. Ian wiped his hands on a towel as he stepped away from the stove, the scent of browned butter and garlic filling the small kitchen. He wasn't much of a cook, but tonight Violet had insisted on making her favorite pan, fried ravioli with cheese from the corner deli. It had become their Friday routine. He glanced at the clock. Nearly 6. Ava's dinner invitation had been for Sunday, but he hadn't stopped thinking about it since she asked. He'd stared at his closet that morning longer than he should have, wondering if his one decent button-down still fit. It did, barely. Can I wear my sparkly shoes to Miss Ava's? Violet asked, hopping onto the counter beside him. If you can find both of them, Ian said, reaching around her for the colander. Last saw, one was under the couch. She grinned. I'll look tomorrow. I want to look nice. Ian ruffled her hair. You always do. The next evening, as they pulled up to Ava's house, Ian parked his truck at the curb and stared out the window. The place was something else. Not flashy, but big. Real big. Wide porch, ivy along the brick, soft lights glowing from inside. A house that looked like warm bread and old money. You nervous? Violet asked from the back seat. Nope, Ian lied, then he took a breath. Okay, maybe a little. Ava opened the door before they even knocked. She wore a slate blue blouse and jeans tucked into boots. Her hair was down this time, waves brushing her shoulders. She waved them inside, her son Victor trailing behind her with a flower-dusted apron tied around his waist. I hope you're hungry, Ava said, leading them into a kitchen that had more counter space than Ian's entire living room. Victor insisted on making fresh dough. There was a minor explosion involving eggs, but we survived. Victor groaned. I told you not to tell them that. Violet laughed and immediately ran off with him toward the hallway, leaving Ian and Ava alone in the kitchen. Your daughter's adorable, Ava said, opening a bottle of white wine. She's got your eyes. Ian rubbed the back of his neck. She gets her brains from her mom, but thanks. You're underestimating yourself, Ava said, handing him a glass. I doubt you've ever backed down from a challenge. He glanced around. Coming here counts as one. Ava leaned against the counter. Why? He hesitated. Because this place, I'm not used to this. I didn't ask you here to impress you, she said. Asked you here because I enjoyed talking to you. He nodded, taking a sip. The wine was crisp, tart, probably imported. He didn't dare ask how much the bottle cost. Dinner was surprisingly casual. Victor proudly served the pasta with a side of garlic bread that was slightly burned around the edges. Ian didn't say a word. Ava had draped a soft linen runner across the table, and a single candle flickered in the middle. It felt like something out of a movie, but no one was posturing. It was just easy. "Do you work mostly on trucks or all kinds of cars?" Victor asked between bites. "Anything with wheels and an engine," Ian said. "Even fixed a lawnmower last week. That was a first." "Cool," Victor said. "Mom's car makes a weird noise when it turns left." Ava shot her son a look. "We're not turning this into a free consultation." Ian laughed. "You'd be surprised how often I get that." After dinner, the kids disappeared into the living room. Ava stayed behind, collecting plates. Ian helped without asking. "You're not what I expected," she said, placing silverware into the dishwasher. "Because," showed up to career day smelling like motor oil. "No," she said, "because most people I meet in my world, they're curated, polished in a way that feels fake. You're not." He looked at her. "Do you like that?" "I do," she said softly, "more than I should." The air shifted. Ian leaned back against the counter, arms folded. "I don't usually do this." "Neither do I," she said. "You're the kind of woman who probably has a calendar planned out 6 months in advance." "8," she admitted, "but I canceled a meeting Monday morning, just in case you wanted to see me again." He blinked. "You cleared your schedule for me." "I cleared it for the possibility," she said. "You're not the only one taking a risk here." He nodded, not trusting himself to say more. Later, when they gathered the kids to leave, Victor handed Violet a paper bag filled with leftover cookies. "Found your other sparkly shoe," he whispered. Violet beamed. "Thanks." Ian turned to Ava in the doorway. "Thanks for dinner, and for not making me feel like I don't belong." "You do," she said, "even if it doesn't feel like it yet." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'll see you soon." "You better." As they drove away, Violet clutched the cookie bag like treasure. "Are we seeing them again?" Ian smiled. "Yes, I think we are." Inside the truck, the radio buzzed with static, but he didn't turn it off. For the first time in a long while, silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, like something was finally beginning. By the second week of seeing Ava, Ian realized his life had started to shift quietly, but undeniably. It wasn't just about her. It was the way he caught himself whistling while rotating tires, or how Violet hummed songs she learned from Victor while brushing her teeth. Even the garage felt different, not cleaner, but somehow lighter, like the air had changed. Ava never came by unannounced, but that Friday, she and Victor showed up just as Ian was closing shop. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the oil-stained pavement. Ian had just finished locking the side entrance when he saw her car pull in. Victor jumped out of the backseat before the engine even stopped. "You said could see the inside." Ava stepped out more slowly, shielding her eyes from the glare. "Told him about your garage. He's been pestering me ever since." Ian chuckled, tossing his keys into his palm. "Well, I can't promise it's exciting, but the floor doesn't swallow you whole." Victor darted ahead, eyes wide as he entered. Inside, he wandered between the lifts and tool cabinets like he'd found buried treasure. "So this is where you work," Ava said, glancing around. "You weren't kidding. It smells like rubber and metal." Ian leaned against the doorframe. "You expected chandeliers." "No," she said, "but maybe a soda machine." He pointed to the back wall, out of order since last spring. She laughed, brushing windblown hair off her cheek. "I'm starting to think you like things that don't work perfectly." "Maybe it just believe they're fixable." Ava looked at him, her smile fading into something more thoughtful. "That's a good way to see the world. Victor ran over, holding a wrench like a trophy. Can I fix something? Ian crouched beside him. Next time, you gotta earn your stripes first. That night, Ian and Violet were invited back to Ava's. Only this time, it wasn't just dinner. We're doing a movie night, Ava had said, almost shyly. Victor wants to show Violet his favorite. The living room had been rearranged. Blankets piled high, pillows scattered like fortresses. A projector aimed at one wall and bowls of popcorn sat like centerpieces on the floor. Violet and Victor curled up instantly, their giggles echoing as the opening credits rolled. Ava sat beside Ian on the oversized couch, close but not touching. You ever do this growing up? She asked, eyes still on the screen. Not really, Ian said. My dad worked nights. Mom was always tired. We watched the news mostly. Ava turned to him. My parents had a screening room, but it was always quiet. Formal, we didn't laugh, we watched. He glanced at her. You laugh now. Only when it matters. An hour passed, and the kids drifted to sleep mid-scene. Victor's head rested on Violet's shoulder. Ava reached over to pull a blanket across them both. They look peaceful, she whispered. Ian nodded, like nothing in the world could touch them. She turned to him, her voice lower. Is it hard, doing it all alone? He hesitated. Some days, yeah, but I don't know anything else. It's not the missing sleep or the bills. It's when she asks questions I don't have answers to. Victor asked me once why his dad never calls, Ava said. Told him some people don't know how to love right. He cried anyway. They sat in silence for a beat, the movie flickering across their faces. Then she reached over and took his hand. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. But it felt like something shifted. Not the start of something brand new, but the moment two people, carrying different weights, realized they might be strong enough to carry them together. A week later, Ava invited Ian to a charity gala. It's for the hospital, she said, almost apologetically. I usually go alone, but thought maybe you'd want to see my world for a night. Ian froze for a second. I don't own a suit. I'll take care of it, she said quickly, her expression careful. Not because I think you need help, just because I want you there. He looked into her eyes. There was nothing patronizing in her voice, only hope. That Friday, a package arrived at the garage. Inside was a tailored black suit, shoes polished to a shine, and a note. Wear this, trust me. That night, after Violet had been dropped off at his sister's, Ian drove across town in his truck, suit hanging in the backseat. He changed in Ava's guest room, fumbling with the tie until she appeared in the doorway. Need help? He turned and forgot how to breathe. She wore a deep navy gown, elegant and simple, her hair swept back to reveal a pair of delicate earrings that caught the light every time she moved. But it wasn't the dress or the makeup. It was the way she looked at him, like he belonged there. You clean up nice, she said. I could say the same, he managed. The gala was held at a historic hotel downtown. Chandeliers glittered above marble floors, and laughter echoed through vaulted halls. Ian followed Ava through the crowd, nodding politely as she introduced him to board members and donors. This is Ian, she said more than once. He's a friend. No one questioned his presence. No one looked down their nose, and even if they had, he didn't care. Not when Ava glanced at him like he grounded her. Later, as they stepped onto the balcony to escape the noise, Ian turned to her. I don't fit here. Yes, she said, you do. You fit anywhere I am. He stared at her, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Why me? He asked. You could have anyone in this room. She stepped closer. Because you don't see me as someone to impress. You see me, and I haven't had that in a long time. Then, without hesitation, she kissed him. It wasn't rushed or nervous. It was certain, like two people who'd been circling each other for long enough. When they pulled apart, Ava's voice was soft. I don't want to pretend this is casual anymore. Ian looked at her, the weight of her words settling in his chest. Neither do I. And for the first time, the difference between their worlds didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a bridge. Ian stood outside Ava's townhouse, adjusting the collar of his jacket as he rang the bell. It was late afternoon on a Sunday, the kind of crisp spring day that made everything feel possible. He'd just come from a job 2 towns over an old Pontiac that needed a new ignition coil, and he hadn't even gone home to change. He didn't need to. Ava had seen him covered in dirt, grease, and exhaustion. She'd kissed him anyway. The door opened before he could knock again. Ava leaned against the frame, casual in a soft linen shirt and jeans, her bare feet curled slightly on the threshold. "Hey," she said, voice light. "Hey," he replied. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything." "You are," she said, tugging him inside, "but I'm not complaining." They walked through the foyer, the sound of Victor and Violet's laughter floating down from upstairs. Ava glanced toward the staircase. They're doing an epic Lego build. Think there's a dinosaur-themed skyscraper involved. Sounds structurally unsound, Ian said. Highly, she agreed. They paused in the kitchen, where sunlight streamed across the marble countertops. Ava slid a mug of coffee toward him without asking and perched on a stool across the island. "I've been thinking about something," she said, wrapping her hands around her own cup. "And I want to say it before I lose my nerve." Ian raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who don't really see me. They see my job, my money, my last name, not the person underneath." She looked down, then back up. "But you see me, and I don't want to let that go." Ian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're not going to." "I want more," she said, voice low but steady. "Not just dinners and movie nights. I want a life, with real mornings and messy afternoons, with you." Ian exhaled through his nose, heart beating faster than he'd like to admit. "Are you sure you're ready for that? Because, come with late bills, a truck that barely survives the winter, and a kid who still thinks ketchup counts as a vegetable." Ava laughed, then reached across the island to take his hand. "I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for real." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then you've got it." Upstairs, something crashed, followed by shouts of triumph. Ava smiled. "You think they're building or demolishing?" "Little of both," Ian said. They climbed the stairs to find the kids mid-celebration, Victor hoisting a Lego tower while Violet clapped. When they saw the adults, they both immediately launched into a breathless explanation of the build's many features, including a built-in escape slide and a helicopter pad made from spoons. Later, as the kids settled down with a puzzle, Ava led Ian out to the garden behind her house. It was quiet there, small trees swayed gently, and a wooden bench sat beneath a blooming dogwood. "I've never brought anyone back here," she said, stepping onto the grass barefoot. "Not even Victor's father." Ian followed, watching her carefully. "Why me?" She stopped in front of the bench, turning to face him. "Because you make me feel like I can be more than what everyone expects, and you never ask me to be anything I'm not." He sat down slowly. "I've been thinking too," he said, "about what it would mean to really try us, and I keep coming back to the same thing." "What's that?" "I want Violet to grow up seeing what love looks like. Not just the easy parts, but the hard ones too. I want her to know that even when life's messy and loud and full of bad days, there's still someone who stays." Ava sat beside him. "Then we stay together." They sat like that for a while, the sunlight softening around them, the air filled with the rustle of trees and the distant sound of children's laughter. It was the kind of moment that didn't need a kiss or a grand declaration, it just needed to be. Over the next few weeks, their lives began to blend in quiet, meaningful ways. Ava showed up at the garage one Saturday with lunch packed in a cooler and a new set of spark plugs she'd picked up on the way. Ask the guy at the counter what you'd need. He looked terrified. Ian grinned. You're going to put me out of a job. Doubtful, she said, handing him a sandwich. He drove her and the kids out to a field by the lake one warm evening, where they roasted marshmallows over a portable grill and watched the stars come out. Victor and Violet took turns telling ghost stories that made no sense but had them all laughing until their sides hurt. One night, after the kids had fallen asleep in the backseat on the drive home, Ava glanced over at Ian as he drove. You know, I could have gone my whole life never meeting you. He nodded slowly, and could have gone mine thinking love had a ceiling. She reached over and laced her fingers with his. We're not going back to that. The final moment came a month later, on a bright Saturday morning. Ian had just finished fixing Ava's espresso machine for the third time when she stepped into the kitchen with a small envelope in her hand. He looked up, wiping his hands. What's that? She held it out, an invite. He opened it and stared. Inside was a single sheet of heavyweight cream paper, embossed with gold lettering. A wedding invitation with his name and hers listed as hosts. He blinked. You're planning a wedding. I am, she said. Ours. He looked up, stunned. You're proposing to me. Technically, she said, but only if you want to say yes. He didn't hesitate. Of course, I want to say yes. She smiled, eyes bright. Then we do it, nothing fancy, just us, the kids, and people who matter. 2 weeks later, in a quiet garden with dogwoods blooming all around, Ian stood in a charcoal suit beside Ava, who wore a dress simple enough to be elegant and soft enough to be unforgettable. Victor held the rings. Violet scattered wildflowers instead of petals, and when the vows were spoken, there wasn't a single dry eye not from the guests, and certainly not from Ian. When they kissed, it didn't feel like a fairy tale or a fantasy. It felt like the end of loneliness, the start of everything. And as they walked back down the makeshift aisle, hand in hand with their kids running ahead of them, Ava leaned in and whispered, I told you I wasn't trying to impress you. Ian smiled, heart full. You didn't have to, you just had to show up. And she always would. Ian stood in the middle of the living room, holding a length of curtain rod in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. So, does this go left or right? Ava leaned against the doorway of their new house, arms crossed, watching him with an amused expression. That depends. Do you want the drapes to open properly or be a permanent sculpture? I was going for modern art, he said, tilting his head, but function works too. The house was theirs, not hers, not his. The deed had both names on it, the rooms still half unpacked, the walls blank with possibility. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even in the same zip code as Ava's old place. But it had a yard for the kids, a sun-drenched kitchen, and a garage out back that Ian had already begun converting into a dream workspace. Victor's voice rang out from upstairs. Dad, where are the batteries? Ava glanced up. Check the drawer under the microwave. Victor called back something unintelligible. And moments later, there was a triumphant shout followed by the telltale whir of a remote-controlled car zipping across the floorboards. Ian set down the screwdriver. What do you think? Too small for the four of us. Ava walked in slowly, trailing her fingers along the back of the couch. It's just big enough for everything that matters. He watched her cross the room, barefoot, her hair pulled up in a messy twist. It was Saturday morning, and she hadn't touched a drop of makeup. She looked more beautiful than she ever had in diamonds. Do you miss it? He asked. The old life, the parties, the penthouse. Ava reached for his hand. I don't miss being lonely in a full room. Don't miss my name being the most interesting thing about me to someone. I still don't know how you drink your coffee. Ian said, pulling her closer. With cream and a little too much cinnamon, she replied, brushing her fingers across his jaw. You remember now. I remember everything, he said. She kissed him, slow and steady, the kind of kiss that didn't need urgency because it had certainty. When they pulled away, she rested her forehead against his. You know what we haven't done yet. Besides hang the curtains. Taken a real honeymoon. Ian laughed. We have 2 kids, a workbench full of half-repaired alternators, and a refrigerator that still hums like it's swallowing a ghost. When exactly are we supposed to sneak away? Ava stepped back, eyes gleaming. I had a thought, hear me out. He raised an eyebrow. This should be good. I bought a piece of land, a little lakefront plot about 2 hours north, just trees, water, and a tiny cabin that needs a roof. Thought maybe we could fix it up. Ian stared at her. You bought land. Technically, we did, she said. And I figured if I'm going to learn how to swing a hammer, I might as well learn from the best. He wrapped his arms around her waist. You're serious. We can take weekends, bring the kids, make it ours, build something from scratch. He kissed the side of her neck. You're going to regret giving me access to power tools in the wilderness. I've already accepted it, she said, grinning. Besides, I like the idea of watching you work without a shirt. Victor came skidding into the room, remote in hand, followed by Violet, who was trying to balance a stack of books on her head. Mom, Violet shouted, we want pancakes. Dad said he'd make them, Victor added. Ava looked at Ian. Did you? I may have hinted, he replied diplomatically. She turned toward the kitchen. Then I'll get the griddle, you do the flipping. They cooked together while the kids argued over who got the first batch. Ian burned one, and Ava dropped a spatula, and someone spilled syrup on the counter. But by the time they sat down, every plate was full and every voice was laughing. After breakfast, Ava dragged a large white envelope from under the stack of mail on the console table. This came yesterday. Waited for you to open it. He wiped his hands and took it carefully. Inside was a certificate, an official approval letter for the community grant Ava had applied for under both their names, one that would fund a youth mechanics program in town. Ian had helped her write the proposal late at night, sitting at the kitchen table with Violet asleep on his lap. He looked up. We got it. I told you we would, she said. He stepped forward and kissed her, longer this time. You know what we are. A little insane. Maybe, but we're a damn good team. She ran her fingers through his hair. You still want to build that community garage? With everything I've got. They spent the rest of the day mapping out logistics on the back porch while the kids painted rocks in the yard. By sunset, the plans were half-formed, but the dream already felt real. That night, after the kids were tucked in and the dishes were done, Ava curled up beside Ian on their couch, a blanket draped across their legs. She laid her head on his chest, listening to the quiet thump of his heart. Do you ever think about how this all started? She asked. Every time I pass an elementary school, he said. Career day changed everything. She laughed softly. I still can't believe I asked you to coffee. I still can't believe I said yes. I can, she whispered, because even back then you were brave. He kissed the top of her head. No, I was just lucky. No, she said, looking up at him. We both were. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. The house creaked in the way new homes do, settling into the soil. And inside, 2 lives, once completely separate, had become something whole. They sat like that well into the night, no need for words or certainty. They had both. They had love that had been tested, stretched, and stitched together not by grand gestures alone, but by small, daily choices. And in every way that mattered, they had forever. The cabin was finished by the end of summer. It had a tin roof, hand-built stairs, and a porch that overlooked a still lake with water clear enough to see the sky. On weekends, they loaded up the truck and drove north, sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone. Ian built a fire pit and taught Victor how to split kindling. Ava planted wildflowers by the windows and read under the trees while Violet braided her hair. They didn't need to escape from life anymore. They had simply built a better one. And when friends asked how it all began, Ava always answered the same way, her fingers laced through Ian's. It started when I saw a man who didn't belong in my world, and realized I'd been living in the wrong one all along.